Do 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 do. Hey, good morning. Happy 4th of July to you. Yay, 4th of July, 4th of July. Happy 4th of July. This is my Minecraft world. It's a brand new world. It's like for 1.21. They got trial chambers now. Ooh, trial chambers and a bunch of other little things. Like the auto crafter. Ooh, the auto crafter. Except these things require like redstone stuff, and I do not have netherite, because you only get nether quartz. You only get nether quartz from the nether, and I haven't gone there yet. So let's prepare. Like so today I'm gonna go to the nether. So I got my crafting station all geared up here. Yeah, buddy. I got my room here for smelting all the ores. And why am I using this one instead of this one? Because I want to get the experience out of this. Because I'm like rocking the bad gear right now. I have one pickaxe that's enchanted, and that's why I have all this iron. It's because of the fortune pickaxe. It makes mining worthwhile. Otherwise, it's not really worth it, because you strip everything out of your immediate area, and then and then it's not enough. So you have to continually widen your search area, bigger and bigger, wider and wider, in order to find the iron. The iron. So, but with Fortune 3, it makes it 3 times as efficient to mine. So that's what I did. I dug mines, and I went hunting for the good stuff, for the iron and the copper. But I have way too much copper. Copper's a thing now, right? So before, copper was like worthless. You couldn't really do anything with it. Now copper's a thing. You can build stuff out of it. You can even build redstone components out of it. So yeah, copper's okay now. I'm okay with mining copper, but right now I have too much copper. So yeah, welcome to here. I'm gonna turn this to all chat so I can see everybody. Welcome to the 4th of July. Yay, it's the 4th of July in the United States. Today, this one's a particularly poignant 4th of July. Particularly poignant because we are in the midst of an existential crisis. The country, the United States. We are in the midst of an existential crisis. The Republicans are essentially the party of white supremacists. They're the old Confederacy. They're the rebirth of the old Confederacy. This happened like gradually over time. It's not like it happened instantaneously, because like all the time racists love to say that the Democrats were the ones who were in the Confederates back in the day. Yeah, back in the day, 150 years ago. If you're talking 150 years ago, sure, you can say the Democrats were the ones who were in the Confederates. But things have changed, friend. Things have changed a lot. So in the 40s, what happened was the Democrats, the Democrats, there's like the racist component of Democrats and like the regular component of Democrats. And the racist component of Democrats got pissed off in the 40s. And they left en masse. They left the Democratic Party and they joined the Republican Party. En masse. So so the Dixiecrats are the Southern Democrats. The Southern Democrats who were involved with white supremacy. The Dixiecrats left the Democratic Party in the 1940s and joined the Republican Party. How do I know this is what happened? Because look at what happened with registration of Black Americans. Black Americans changed their registration from being 50-50 Democrat-Republican to like 90% Republican or Democrat. all the black people joined the Democratic Party, and all the Dixiecrats joined the Republican Party. So that's how you know the parties flipped in the 1940s. So Republicans became the party of the Confederacy, of white supremacy. And they have been on a mission to take back, to start up the Civil War again. That's their mission. They lost the Civil War, and they were never happy with it. But unfortunately, Andrew Johnson was the vice president who took over after Lincoln was assassinated by the South, by the Confederates. The Confederates assassinated Lincoln, and Andrew Johnson took over. Andrew Johnson was very, very sympathetic to the South, to the Confederates. And Andrew Johnson let all the Confederates back into government, which was ridiculous. Like, how can you let the Confederates back into government? But he did, because he's a traitor. And he got impeached. And you need like 67 votes to remove a president from office. He got 66. He barely held on to his seat. He barely held on to his seat. And really, I think that's a mistake. He should have been removed. But anyways, after that, the Americans passed the 14th Amendment, which said that if you commit an insurrection, you cannot run in the election anymore. You can't do it. So yeah, the Confederates have been trying to come back from their defeat, and they were never properly destroyed. They were allowed to fester and to grow back. It's like cutting out a cancer tumor, but not getting all of the cancer. It's just going to come back, and that's what's happened with the Confederates. Except now they're called Republicans because the parties flipped. Remember, in the 1940s, and it's not me saying it. Look at what happened with the Black Americans. Black Americans all stopped joining the Republican Party and started joining the Democratic Party. So, yeah, it's been a slow slog. It's been like a while. Democrats or Republicans have been trying to take over the United States for a while. This is gravel. They've been trying to take over the United States for a while. In the 30s, there was a bunch of fascists who it's called the business plot. They wanted to overthrow the American government and replace it with a fascist government. And like, it didn't work because Butler Smedley, the general who they picked to do the coup, Butler Smedley refused to do it. So their plan failed. But yeah, I'm not saying. What I'm saying is that American democracy has been under constant threat. Because democracy, what's the problem with democracy? Democracy on purpose dilutes the power into the people. It doesn't concentrate the power, it dilutes it into the people so that no one group can take over everything. That's the purpose of the United States. You dilute the power into the people and you give people a vote so that the power resides in the people. And fascists, white supremacists, they hate that. Their model of governance is that the elites are the only ones who really know what's going on. So the power must be invested in the elites, not the people. That's what they believe. So forever they've been trying to get rid of this democracy so they can concentrate power into the hands of the elite and then tell the rest of us to fuck off. Shut up and serve. Shut up and be good servants. That's what they want. So yeah. But there have been Americans who have resisted this takeover. Time and time again, they resisted the fascist takeover. And it will be like that again. Americans are going to resist this attempt at overthrowing our government again. So what is it this time? What is it this time? So the Republicans basically stole, they cheated. They cheated in order to get control of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the only branch of government that doesn't have a direct check on it. There's no check of the Supreme Court. So if you fully capture the Supreme Court, you can pretty much do whatever you want. And that's what's happened. Because the Republicans denied Obama a Supreme Court seat, and then cheated to get 3 other Supreme Court members on, now they control the court 6-3. And with their power of 6-3, they essentially, what they did was they ignored the Constitution. The Constitution is really, really clear. It's easy to read. Anybody could read it. I mean, it's in English, but the language isn't that difficult. The language is pretty clear. That way, everyone can understand what's going on. Everybody. If you can read, even if you can't read, you can have someone read it to you, and you're able to reason, use your brain to figure out what it says, what it's saying, the intent, what they're talking about. Like, it's not that hard. So that's why it's so egregious that the Republican court ignored the plain text of the Constitution to essentially crown themselves kingmakers. The Republican court crowned themselves kingmaker. Now, here, what's the history? What's the story behind all this? What am I talking about? Okay, so Donald Trump was indicted for multiple crimes. One of his crimes was trying to overthrow the government on January 6, 2024. Donald Trump made an absurd argument. An absurd argument. His argument, he said, his defense of trying to overthrow the government on January 6, 2021, his defense was, oh, anything the president does is legal because the president is immune from the law. Which is an absurd argument, right? Because the president is tasked with faithfully upholding the law. That's his job, to uphold the law. How can the president be above the law if he's supposed to uphold the law? Right? He can't do that. In fact, like, no time in our history has any president ever said he needs to be immune from the law in order to do his job. No president has ever said that. And so Donald Trump is making this novel argument that the president is above the law. Now, wait a minute. Why don't we refer back to the document which binds our country together? Let's refer back to the document which binds our country together. I can do that right now. Look at this. I can do it right now. I got it pulled up right here. Check this out. This is Article 1. Article 1, Section 3. Clause 7. Impeachment and judgments. Judgment in the case of impeachment shall not extend further than removal of office. What does that say? What does that mean? Judgment in the case of impeachment shall not extend further than the removal of office. That means when you do impeachment, there's a right there. When you do impeachment, you are not to make impeachment anything more than removing the person from office. The House and the Senate, when they impeach and remove a bad person, they are only supposed to remove him. That's the only power that the Senate and the House have. They can't levy punishments. They can't, like, imprison the guy. The only thing they can do is to remove him from office because that's their job. Get rid of some of this stuff. Gravel. I don't need gravel. Get out of here, gravel. Get out of here. Cobbled deep slate. There we go. Get all my good stuff. There we go. Okay. So that's the first part of that clause, right? That's what it says. Let me get up here real quick to my base so I can like stop. Oh, my bed. Let me sleep in my bed. Okay. Ta-da! Sunrise. All right, let's look at this. Let's keep looking at this. So, the Constitution says, judgment in the case of impeachment shall not extend further, cannot go any farther past. So, even if you're impeached, you can't impose a punishment greater than removal from office. That's what it says, right? And not only can you remove a person from office, you can disqualify them to hold and enjoy any other office of honor, trust, or profit in the United States, right? So that's what this first part says. When you impeach someone, the most you can do is remove them from office and disqualify them from holding any other office in the United States. However, it continues, right? The colon. So it says, but the party convicted, right? The person who was removed from office, the person who was impeached, shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to the law. So that means even if a person is removed from office or not, even if they're removed from office, it doesn't take away their liability and they're subject to the law. It doesn't take it away. No matter what, people are under the law in the United States. Well, the Supreme Court ignored that. The Supreme Court totally ignored that and made up its own word. It made up the word called immunity. Now you can look through you can read the entire Constitution. You can read the whole Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution is it going to say the word immunity. Nowhere. Because it doesn't exist. Because office holders are never ever immune from the law. Never ever immune. In fact, it says the opposite. It says office holders are subject to the law. So the Republicans on the Supreme Court invented their own standard, invented words, and ignored the Constitution. What are the words that the Supreme Court created? The Supreme Court created the word immunity. And then the Supreme Court created the word official acts. So the way the Supreme Court did this, the Republicans on the Supreme Court, the way they did this was, they said, okay, a president has something called immunity, something that we made up called immunity. But this immunity only applies to official acts. The immunity that we created doesn't apply for not official acts. Well, since there's nowhere in the Constitution that talks about official acts and unofficial acts, and nowhere in the Constitution does it talk about immunity, what the fuck are they talking about? What are they talking about? And then the Supreme Court says, well, that's the thing. Nobody can say what is an official act or an unofficial act, except for the Republicans on the Supreme Court. They're the only ones who can determine if a person's act is official or not official. So in other words, the Supreme Court crowned themselves kingmakers. They are the only ones able to determine if a president acts legitimately or not. The law can't decide it. People can't decide it. It's not obvious. It's only something the Supreme Court can decide. And who controls the Supreme Court? The Republicans. So that's what I say when I mean that the Republicans have committed a coup. Is that a coup? What is a coup? A coup is the illegitimate seizure of power. Illegitimate. That's the key. It's illegitimate. There's no basis in law or the Constitution for anybody, any president, to have immunity from the law. It's not there. But the Republicans stole that power anyways. So that makes it illegitimate. And what do they do with that power? Did they take that power and dilute it into the people? Did they further the idea of America whereby the power is invested in the people? Did they do that? No. No. Instead, they did the opposite. They took power and concentrated it into the hands of the Supreme Court. So they did the opposite of the idea of America. The idea of America is that the power is spread into the people, so that it's not concentrated anywhere, so that the people are the ones who ultimately decide. But the Supreme Court took that away and said, no, we're not going to listen to the Constitution. We're going to make up this new thing called immunity, and only we are able to determine who is immune. So in that way, the Supreme Court, the Republicans on the Supreme Court, they keep away immunity from Joe Biden. See, that's the trick. Joe Biden will never ever get immunity. He will never get immunity because the Republicans of the Supreme Court don't want him to have immunity. But Donald Trump, he will get immunity because the Republicans on the Supreme Court want Donald Trump to have immunity. Now, who are the people on the Supreme Court? There's at least two who are corrupt. That's Sammy Alito, who already has made clear that through flying the flag of insurrectionists at his house, and he's written multiple opinion pieces and published it in the newspaper, which show that he is not on board with the American system. He wants to overthrow the country in favor of an autocracy, a dictatorship. And then number two, we got Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas has been bribed by billionaires. We have a record of all the times he's been bribed by the billionaires. But unfortunately, the only mechanism to remove a Supreme Court justice is through the legislature, and the legislature is bifurcated, is cut in half between Unionists who preserve the United States and Confederates who want to overthrow the United States. Remember, the Confederates were let back into government at the end of the Civil War because Andrew Johnson. So the Confederates don't want to remove the guy they worked so hard to put into place. They're the ones who corrupted these judges. They're not going to remove them. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is that we're facing, so essentially it's already happened, right? It's already happened. The coup has already taken place. The Republicans have already seized illegitimate power. All the institutions of the Americans that were designed to protect them from the illegitimate seizure of power have failed. So it comes down to the ultimate truth of the United States, that the power resides in the people. It's going to come down to the people. The people are going to be the ones who are going to stop this coup from being carried out. It's the only way. Everything else has failed. All our institutions have failed. The only thing that can save us is us, Americans, from the fascists. So happy Independence Day. What is Independence Day? What did that even start from? Where did that even come from? So the United States was not always a free country. In fact, it wasn't always the United States. Before it was the United States, it was a colony. These states were not United States, they were a colony. A colony of England. England decided, hey, we have this technology to travel around the world. We're going to use this technology to colonize other lands. We're going to conquer the people that live there, and with the stolen labor of Africans, we're going to make a colony, and with the fruits of that colony, we're going to feed England, and we're going to make England more powerful. So the reason the colonies were created was not for the benefit of the people, it was for the benefit of England. And who is England? Who is England? Remember, England at that time was ruled by a king, King George. So in order to get King George more power and more wealth, King George colonized the Americas and stole the wealth of America to send back to King George for the benefit of King George, not for the people. The people were not even considered. The people didn't even matter to King George, because the power resided in King George. Why did it reside in King George? Because traditionally, that's the way it was forever. And so out of tradition, King George was the leader, and then that's just the way it was. All the people had to submit to King George, and they had no freedom for themselves. That's the way it was. Well, that might be fine and dandy if you live in England, because you're right next to the king. Right. And it's not fine and dandy, right? It's not fine and dandy for humans to not have freedom. The natural state of humans is freedom. The natural state is freedom. It takes an organization to strip humans of the freedom that is naturally theirs. And then so King George had this organization to strip humans of their freedom for his own benefit. And part of this organization was the colonization of Americas. So, but the people in America, they lived very, very far from England. Like, it was an ocean away, and they didn't have telecommunications yet. There was no such thing as telecommunications. If you wanted to get any information from the states, from the England to the colonies, it had to travel over the ocean, and it would take forever. It takes a long time to travel from England to the colonies. So the people in the Americas started to understand that the natural state of human beings is freedom. And they sought to organize themselves in such a way that they could preserve their freedom and enjoy the liberty that comes with being a free human. So that all their energy isn't stolen by a king for the good of the king. Instead, people can keep their own energy and improve themselves and their communities. That was the goal. That was the idea of the that was the idea, right? And that idea started to spread through the colonies, to all the people in the colonies. Hey, another dungeon. Oh, hold on, I gotta kill these guys. Die, little baby, die. Baby zombie, die. Quick charge. Pfft. Got a golden apple. I'll take the quick charge, sure. Bread. Sure, I'll take bread. I don't have much food. Ooh, diamond horse armor. Okay, take more. Alright. So the people of the United States, or people of the colonies, in order to secure their freedom, rebelled against the king. They said, what did they say? They said America has no kings. There's no king in America. In America, people are free. In America, the only thing that is king is the law. The law. Everyone agrees this is the way it is, and that becomes the way it is because everyone agrees. Everyone's equal before the law. That's the idea. We are equal before the law. And the Americans fought a revolution. They fought a war against the powers of the king. What did the king want? The king wanted to concentrate powers into the hands of the king. And the people of the United States said no. The power resides in the people, in us. We're the ones who determine our destiny, not a king. Fuck the king. And so yeah, they fought. They fought a long war that at first seemed hopeless. It seemed like no way are these people going to be able to defeat the strongest empire in the world. There's no way that these American colonists can defeat the strongest empire in the whole world. I mean, literally, England was the world power. England was literally all over the world. It was everywhere. How could you ever hope to defeat the strongest nation in the world? But the Americans did it. They refused to live under the rule of a king, and they threw off the king in order to create a country ruled by laws. The law under which everyone is equal. Everyone is subject to the law. But remember, how did the Americans do it? They didn't do it by themselves. Like, you have to understand, it wasn't by themselves. There was another group of people called slavers. These are the people that stole the labor of Africans for their own wealth. So in other words, they themselves, the slavers, they themselves were like mini kings. Even though they made the declaration that all men are created equal, they actually refused that. It was a paradox, because their wealth derived from stealing the wealth of other humans by denying them their freedom. So it wasn't all hunky-dory, right? Things weren't all perfect. There was this group of people who were pretty much antithetical to the movement. But that's the thing about the America. How are you going to beat the world's strongest empire by yourself? You can't. You need help. And the help they got was from the slavers. The slavers and the Yankees binded together so they could defeat their common enemy, the king. How do I get out of here? And it worked, right? It worked. Against all odds, the Americans, with the help of the slavers, were able to defeat England and create a brand new thing that hadn't existed in the world in a long time, which is democracy. It was a representative democracy. And it wasn't perfect. Of course not. It wasn't perfect. In fact, the Founding Fathers knew it wasn't going to be perfect. That they were limited by time and space. Their consciousness was limited by time and space. And they understood that as time would go on, humans would get smarter and better and learn about more things. So they put in a mechanism into the Constitution that allowed for changes to be made. So that it wasn't a thing that bound people forever. that the Constitution could evolve and grow. But the Constitution was important. It was a plain text document which laid it all out, so that no one could come along and be like, oh yeah, hey, this is what, you know, try to do something different. No, 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 no. It's right there in the Constitution. And one of the fundamental aspects of the Constitution is that all humans are equal before the law. And like, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. Because if everyone's equal before the law, then people are more apt to go along with the idea of what's going on. Because everyone's the same. No one's better than anyone else. There are no kings. There is no nobility. There are no titles. No one's inherently better than anyone else. But that's the thing. Remember, this was only created with the help of slavers. And those slavers are not going to just do it for free. They're not gonna create this world for free. In fact, what turned out is that they want it for themselves. They wanted to crown themselves king. So they went along with it. They went along with the Yankees just long enough until they felt that they could take their own power, that they could crown themselves king. Throw off the English king and replace it with the American king. That's what the slavers wanted. And it came to a head. All of it came to a head in 1850, when the Confederates formed an organization and attacked the United States. Why did they attack the United States? To preserve the institution of slavery. What is slavery? It's the systematic denial of freedom and human rights to people. Which is what? That's crazy. That's the opposite of what America is supposed to be about. America is about freedom, freedom for the human being. If your institution is based on the opposite of that ideal, what does that mean? It means your system is based upon the exploitation and denial of freedom. It's like the opposite of what's going on. So of course you're going to be the enemy of the United States, and that's what happened. The Confederates wanted to crown themselves king, and to do that, they needed to deny human rights to Africans, to steal their labor and keep the fruits of their labor for themselves. So we fought a civil war. There was a civil war, and what ended up happening was President Lincoln, recognized that the American project has to spread. It has to spread. You can't just keep freedom for the white person. You can't do it. Freedom, the nature of the United States, the idea of the United States is that freedom is the natural state of humans, and that all humans are created equal. So Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the Africans from slavery. Which, of course, is no good for the Confederates. The Confederates rely upon the enslavement of Africans. That's how they have to steal the wealth created by the Africans for themselves, just like a king steals the wealth of his subjects for himself. The idea is the same. The slaver and the king have the same idea, denying freedom to humans and stealing their life essence for themselves, so that they can live. Whoa. I'm like, There we go. This right here. This is how you get back. I'm back. All right. So the Americans fought this war against the Confederates, and the Confederates lost. They lost all their territory. All their states, all their territory was invaded by the United States and occupied. And it was good, right? You would think that that's the end of it. That's the end. But the slavers assassinated President Lincoln, and the person who took the place of President Lincoln was named Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was very sympathetic to the South, to the Confederates. Very, very sympathetic to the Confederates. Andrew Johnson also believed in the idea of white supremacy. And you got to think, well, then how did he become the president after Lincoln? Some dude who thought about white supremacy was the way it was. How did he even get there? So remember, before Lincoln got elected, he had to get elected. He had to get elected by the people. And so, just like in our modern times, there are different factions of the American people that you want to satisfy. That you want to show that you're working with them. So in the United States, there was a group of people who were not so much on board with the idea that all humans were created equal. But Lincoln needed their vote anyways. He needed their vote anyways. No, Andrew Johnson. Andrew Jackson is the general. So, yeah, there's a difference, right? There's Andrew Jackson, who was the general in the Civil War, who became president, and then Andrew Jackson, was an Indian hater. He hated the Native Americans. Andrew Jackson hated the Native Americans. He wanted to steal their land and make it just for white people. So Andrew Jackson was the one who created the Trail of Tears. Andrew Jackson, the guy on the $20 bill who should be removed because he's a war criminal. Andrew Jackson. So the group of Native Americans called the Cherokee lived on the East Coast. That's where they lived. Like forever they lived on the East Coast. Until Andrew Jackson came along. But that's the problem, right? All the colonists and the Americans lived on the East Coast too, because they all came from Europe. Like they're all illegal immigrants. They just showed up and took land and just stole the land from the Native Americans. So the Native Americans are getting more and more crowded. But the Cherokee tried to integrate. They tried to play ball. They're like, all right, guys, you say we're not civilized? Fuck you. We're gonna make our own alphabet and own written language. Look how civilized we are. We're a people, you fucks. Look at us. Andrew Jackson didn't care, and Andrew Jackson rounded up all of the Cherokee on the East Coast, said, fuck your civilization. I'm gonna move you out to the middle of buttfuck nowhere. And try to destroy your culture and your people. Andrew Jackson's is a fuckhead. Fuck Andrew Jackson. No, I'm talking about Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was the running mate eventually vice president after Lincoln. Lincoln chose Andrew Johnson to shore up his base. The white people were not so sure of Lincoln, so in order to assuage their concerns, Lincoln chose a running mate that was, I guess, a white supremacist. That's Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson. So, let me put this away. So, Andrew Johnson became president after Lincoln was assassinated, and he is the one that allowed all the Confederates back into government. He stopped the Congress from implementing a lot of their reforms. So Reconstruction never really got finished, and the Confederate powers that be persisted throughout time. They weren't crushed. They should have been executed, honestly. All the leaders of the Confederacy should have been rounded up and executed. All of them. All their monuments destroyed. They should have been wiped off the face of the earth. But because Andrew Johnson came into power, he protected the white supremacists, and they didn't die. They got to live throughout time and continue to try to overthrow the government. So that's what happened, right? The Confederates weren't crushed. Instead, they persisted throughout time, and they I guess bided their time until they could regroup and try again. So that's what's been going on. Like, at the end of the Civil War, all of a sudden the United States had all this territory. I mean, it stole basically from Mexico and from the Native Americans, and then they sought out, the white Americans sought out to settle and conquer the territory that they got. The thing is that the Native Americans in the north part of the United States were pretty strong. Americans were using muskets for the longest time, and muskets are shit compared to, like, a musket. Like, you have a fire rate of like once per minute. A skilled warrior, skilled at using a bow and arrow, can shoot way more arrows than a unskilled musket user can use. Even if the musket user was skilled, the level of technology of muskets was so shit that they could at best do a rate of one shot per minute. So so the white Americans had a real hard time expanding westward because they couldn't defeat the Native Americans until the invention of the rifle. Once the Americans got the rifle and the repeating rifle, then you didn't need skilled warriors. It takes a long time to learn the skill of archery. It takes a lot of time and effort and practice. I mean, they knew this, like, back in the day, in medieval times. It took a long time to train archers. But if you can hand a peasant a crossbow, they had all the benefits of ranged combat, but you didn't need to spend years and years and years learning archery. Just hand them a crossbow. Well, it's the same thing with firearms. Muskets were shit. But because, like, you didn't need to train anyone to do it, but the technology itself was crap. Well, once they figured out how to do repeating rifles, that changed everything. So, but the problem was that the Native Americans were still a formidable force. And in the north, the North Midwest, they were able to preserve themselves. And the Americans couldn't defeat the Native Americans in the north, which hampered their westward expansion. But in the south, they were able to defeat the Native Americans in the south. So the Confederates were able to spread westward more quickly than the Yankees. And because of that, the Confederacy, like the West, historically was very, very racist toward Mexicans, towards blacks, towards Chinese, towards Japanese. Like, the contradiction of the slavers was never truly erased from the United States. So it took a lot of time for things to sort out again. But eventually we got to the point of the well, in World War II, before World War II in the 30s, there was the business plot to overthrow the government, the United States government, and install fascism, which is to concentrate the power into the hands of the elite. But that failed because of General Smedley Butler. Smedley Butler defeated, or like, didn't go along with the plan. Well, that didn't stop them. They tried again. They keep trying. So that, I mean, like, it's a long process. Like, it's a long story how we got here. I mean, like, shit went down, and now we're at this point. In the 1940s, the parties flipped. The Dixiecrats joined the Republicans. And then now we get to this point. What's his name? Reagan hired that guy. What's his name? Hired a guy to create something called the Southern Strategy. Lee Atwater. Reagan hired a guy called Lee Atwater to create something called the Southern Strategy. What is the Southern Strategy? The Southern Strategy of Lee Atwater was to use coded racism to appeal to other racists in the American society. That way you could organize the racists and get them to act as a unified whole by using racism as your unifying principle. And it worked. It worked. That's how Reagan got into power. And Ronald Reagan is like a terrible president. He's awful. Ronald Reagan created. So there was the Iranians had a revolution. The West. The leader of the Iranians before was someone called the Shah. The Shah was put into place via a coup from the West. England and the United States worked together to overthrow the Iranian government and install a government friendly to the West. And that the leader of that was called the Shah. Well, in like 1979, a bunch of religious extremists overthrew the Shah, overthrew the government, and and installed a religious dictatorship that was unfriendly to the West. And when they did so, they took a bunch of hostages from the American embassy. They took a bunch of American hostages from the embassy. So Jimmy Carter was president, and Jimmy Carter arranged for the hostages to be released. Unbeknownst to the Americans and unbeknownst to Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan and his crew created a back channel to the Iranian hardliners, the extremists, religious extremists. And Reagan, through the back channel, conducted his own foreign policy. Not the foreign policy of the United States, but the foreign policy of Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan told the religious extremists, do not do business with Jimmy Carter. Do not do business with Jimmy Carter. Do not release the hostages, the American hostages. Keep the American hostages. Keep the American hostages. This will hurt Jimmy Carter's chances for a re-election. And after Reagan becomes president, then you can release the hostages. If you do this, the Reagan administration will reward you. Will reward the Iranian religious extremists for defeating the American president to work with Reagan. What does Reagan represent? The white supremacists. So, and that's what happened. The Iranians changed their mind and didn't release the hostages to Jimmy Carter because they wanted to deal with Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter lost re-election because he couldn't release the hostages. Ronald Reagan became president. Then Ronald Reagan made this deal with the Iranians called, and that's known as the Iran-Contra affair. So Ronald Reagan wanted to have his own foreign policy separate from the United States. But Congress, of course, wouldn't go along with it. They're the ones who control the money. So in order for Ronald Reagan to conduct his own foreign policy free of the United States, he needed a source of money. So what he did was, there was an embargo on sanctions on the Iranian hard religious government that you couldn't sell them weapons. But Ronald Reagan sold them weapons anyways on the down low. He sold the Iranians American weapons. That's why Iran is flying Tomcats. I forget what, F-14s, Tomcats. Like, how did the Iranians get American jets? Because Reagan sold them to them. Reagan sold them all the weapons. And what did Reagan get out of it? He got money. And what did he do with the money? He funded a terrorist group in Nicaragua called the Contras. So in Nicaragua, there was a revolution. The people were sick of... Oh, I have no food. The people were sick of being ruled by a dictator, and they had a revolution. By the and the group of revolutionaries that carried this out were called the Sandinistas. Like, we can debate whether or not the Sandinistas were good or bad guys. Like, it doesn't matter. The Sandinistas were the ones in power, and they're the ones. I think they were elected democratically. So it was a democratic choice for the Nicaraguans to choose the Sandinistas to have the government. Reagan didn't like that because the Sandinista government wasn't friendly to the Western interests and to Western corporations. So. So he wanted to fund the Contras. They're called Contras, but their full name is Contra-Revolutionaries. They were against the revolution. They're against the revolution. They were right-wingers, and Reagan took the money he made from Iran and he gave it to the Contras. The Contras used the money to create right-wing death squads and to go around and massacre villages that were not on board with the Contras. And in doing so, they killed enough people with terrorism to overthrow the democratic government of the Sandinistas and impose their fascist rule that was friendly to the United States. Kind of crazy, right? Sounds a lot like what's happening right fucking now. Just like Reagan created a back channel to Iran, so too did Donald Trump create a back channel to Russia. Just like Reagan wanted to impose a fascist government on Nicaragua, so too does Trump want to impose a fascist government on Ukraine from Russia. Trump is indebted to Putin. So he will get rid of NATO, which is a check on Russia, and he will hand over Ukraine, the people, take away their freedom and give it to Vladimir Putin. It's the same thing. There's a hostage that Russia has right now, a journalist, and Trump has already told Russia not to release the hostage until Trump becomes president. So, like, the parallels between Trump and Reagan are, like, incredible. They're doing the same thing that they've always done. So, what I'm trying to tell you is the historic forces of slavery were never defeated. They evolve, and they're still with us today. And they have taken control of the Supreme Court and given themselves illegitimate power. When you give yourself illegitimate power, that's called a coup. The Republicans are going to try to overthrow the democracy in the United States. They've ignored the Constitution to say that the president is above the law. But not just any president, only the president that is selected by the Supreme Court is above the law. It's in the plain text of the Constitution. I mean, I just read it for you. You can read it again. That's why it's important for us to hold on to our democracy, to get ready to defend it. Like, one way of defending it is to vote en masse. Because of everything. Remember, Republicans hate voting. They do not want people to vote because they don't believe in dispersing power into the people. They believe in concentrating power into the hands of the elite. Hold on, get more coffee. More coffee for the coffee gods. Oh, yeah, crazy, man. It's crazy times. There's no going back. We can't go back. It's too late to go back. There's no such thing as normal anymore. Because Republicans have already made that ruling. The Supreme Court is already illegitimate. It's an illegitimate court that's trying to impose a king upon the United States. Donald Trump wants to make himself king, but the United States has no king. We never did. We never will. Now, Russia would love, Vladimir Putin would love it if the United States devolves in civil war. That's like one of their goals. There's this book put out by a Russian intellectual called Foundations of Geopolitics. And it's basically a wish list. It's a wish list of a Russian wish list where they fantasize about the things they want to happen in order for Russia to regain its power. One of the things that Russia wants to do is destroy the United States, and the way it does it is through civil war. How do you get the United States to devolve into civil war? Well, you got to confuse the people a lot. The whole point is to confuse the people. So the technique they use to confuse the people is called reflexive conditioning. The Russians call it active measures. What it is it's a way of confusing people so much that they give up on the idea of truth. Once they've given up on the idea of truth, then it's easy to manipulate them because nothing's true anymore. So you can tell them anything they want that will make them feel happy. And then that's how you can control them, by flipping the levers to make them to keep them on the happy thing. Or, to enrage them or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? You control their emotions at that point because they've given up on the idea of truth. So let's look at this technique. Like, don't take my word for it. Listen to this guy, Yuri Bezmenov. He's a KGB agent who defected from the USSR and fled to the United States. And he explained in the 80s, he explained what it is that the Russians were trying to do to the American people, which is to confuse them so much that they're unable to think, that they're unable to defend themselves.
Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand.
There's nothing to do with espionage. Only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB.
So what he's saying is that the Russians are using the slow process called active measures, which is ideological warfare. You're attacking not people's bodies, but their brains. You're attacking their brains. This is old. This isn't like something brand new. Russians have been doing this for decades.
Or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American.
So, do you understand? The idea is to change the perception of reality. So generally, we think of reality as what's being true, what's actually there. Like, woo! Like, there's people who have flights of fancy, and then there's people grounded in reality. What's actually there. So, the Russian attack is, the idea is to change the perception of people's reality. The way people perceive reality. They want to change it. The way you know what is true, they want to change it. That's what the Russians are saying.
To such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. You cannot change their mind, even if you...
Okay, so the idea is to change the perception of reality so much that no one is able to agree. And if they're not able to agree, then they're not able to defend themselves, their families, or their country. If you don't agree, if you can't come to an agreement, you can't come together to defend yourselves. Now, like, yeah, so we need to have a common sense of reality. Common ground rules that we all agree on. And normally, right, I mean, that's the basis of what science is. Science is different from religion. It's totally different from religion. Religion asks you to ignore the information of your senses and instead put your faith. It requires faith. What is faith? Faith is belief without evidence. That is faith. That is religion. Religion asks for faith. It says, even though we don't have any evidence of this, you have to believe this is the way it is, even though you don't have any evidence. That is religion. Science, on the other hand, science is the exact opposite. Science says we don't believe anything. We don't believe anything unless there's proof. And what is the proof that we require? We require the proof of our senses. That's called empirical proof. We require the proof. Scientists require the proof of senses. If you can't prove it using reason and senses, then it's not real. So what do? Scientists create these experiments where they control for variables except for one. So they control everything else. Everything else is the same except for one thing. Then they run the experiment and they see how that one thing changes, depending. And the nature of it is that they have to see it. They have to see it or it doesn't count. If you don't see it, then it doesn't count. So and then after that, even if they do see it, even if a scientist runs these experiments and they see, hey, this is the way it is, they still don't believe it because it has to be reproducible. That means another person, another separate person, has to be able to run the same experiment and with their own senses see the same thing. It is the opposite in that of religion, which asks you to believe in the absence of proof, in the absence of evidence. So in that way, we can create a common reality. Everybody sees the same thing, so everyone can come to an agreement that that's the way it is. That's what's real. Because we can all see it. Now, this process that Yuri Bezmenov is talking about, what that does is it destroys this idea of common reality. It makes it so people no longer believe their senses anymore. They do not believe their senses. The way they get reality, much like the religion, how religion asks you to have faith without proof, when someone has lost their ability to discern truth, they fall into something called a cult of personality. A cult of personality means a person only gets their sense of reality from the leader. They ignore the evidence of their senses. They ignore the reason of their brains. And they only take the sense of reality from the leader. That way the leader can say whatever they want and the cultists will believe it and will follow it. So they decouple themselves from their bodies and from reality in order to follow the words of the leader. That's what's happening. That's the result of ideological subversion. So let's start over again and listen to what he says.
Which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior.
So, what he's saying, that even if you show someone proof of with their senses that their bodies can register as sense information and data, even if you prove with beyond reasonable doubt all these things, the person who's been brainwashed is unable to change their mind. They will not change their mind. They follow the rules of the dictates of the leader, regardless of what their bodies tell them. They only believe what the leader says. And so you can't change their mind because they draw reality not from their senses, but from what the leader says.
In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people.
So that's what was supposed to be Reconstruction. Reconstruction was supposed to get rid of the slavers and the people with the slavery ideology. Because remember, the United States, the foundations of the United States, is that the natural state of human beings is freedom, and that all humans are equal before the law. The idea of slavery is that no, some people are better than other people, and those people should be the rulers, and they are allowed to take away the freedom of other human beings and steal their labor and wealth for themselves. Which is totally opposite of the United States. So we fought a war against that. The United States won, and the United States was supposed to spend a generation to get rid of the slavery ideology. But it failed to do so. It failed to do so. So the slavery ideology persisted over time. That's why it's still here with us today.
Who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. Nothing to do with.
So. Oh wait a minute, I lost it.
Not care about your ideas, and it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems.
Okay, essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. Understand how close we came to losing our democracy. When Donald Trump seized power in 2016, remember, Donald Trump only seized power because he had the assistance of the Russian government. He asked for and received help from the Russian government to steal the 2016 election. So Donald Trump was an illegitimate president. Once Donald Trump was in power, he destroyed all of our relationships with our allies. He tried to destroy NATO. He tried to extort Ukraine. He cozied up to Kim Jong-un and tried to destroy our relationships with our Asian allies. he passed the tax cut of 2018, which lowered the tax rate on billionaires to the lowest it's ever been in the United States. So he's trying to destroy the economy. He destroyed our foreign relations. What else? What was it? What were the three things?
Essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems.
Defense systems. Remember that Donald Trump surrendered to the Taliban on February 2020. Donald Trump signed an agreement to surrender to the Taliban on February 20th, or not 20th, but in February of 2020. 1 year before, like later that year, we'd have the election, but he was still president. Here's the thing: Donald Trump never intended to leave office. He never intended to leave office. The agreement he made with the Taliban would be that the Americans would withdraw from Afghanistan in February of 2021. That's 1 month after the transfer of power. But Donald Trump never intended on leaving the office of the presidency. It didn't matter what the election said. He wasn't going to leave. So what that meant was he was going to abandon, and then plus you have to ask, remember Joe Biden, when he came into office, he didn't abide by the timetable set by Donald Trump. Donald Trump said, hey, we're going to be out of there by February. Joe Biden came in and said, you know what, we're going to need more time. We're going to like push this back to like June or something. Why did Joe Biden push back the withdrawal date that Donald Trump had set? Because even though Donald Trump set a withdrawal date for February, he never gave the order to the military to withdraw. He never gave, so no preparations were made to withdraw from Afghanistan in February, because Donald Trump never intended to leave office. He intended to maintain office. He would have had the agreement to withdraw from Afghanistan, but he wasn't going to follow through. That's the key. Donald Trump was not going to follow through with his idea of withdrawing from Afghanistan in February of 2021. He was going to abandon the U.S. military in Afghanistan. That's the key. The way he was going to destroy the military was abandoning them in Afghanistan. But the thing that he didn't count on was that Joe Biden would take power. And then since nothing was done in February, Joe Biden had to push back the withdrawal date so that the U.S. Army could prepare to withdraw. Because they weren't given the order to withdraw by Donald Trump, because Donald Trump never intended them for them to leave. So in that way, Donald Trump was implementing these things. He was destroying our economy, our foreign relations, and our military. All of this was in place. So it didn't work out. Great. So Joe Biden took power. And for the first 2 years, the Democrats, I think, were doing great. They passed a lot of good legislation. When the Republicans had a trifecta in 2018, the only significant piece of legislation the Republicans passed, was the tax cut that cut billionaire tax rates to the lowest level ever. That was the only significant piece of legislation that they passed. But when the Democrats took power in 2021 with the trifecta, they passed a bunch of laws. They reduced the cost of insulin to like $35 a month. They passed the Inflation Reduction Act. They passed the CHIPS Act, which skyrocketed business investment. Business went nuts investing after they passed that law. I mean, like, don't believe me, guys. I'm not, don't believe me. Look at it yourself. So this chart shows. This is from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, S&P Global Projections, as of June 27, 2024. This is real U.S. private investment in manufacturing structures from 2000 to 2034. projected. So in 2018, that's when the Republicans passed their tax cuts for billionaires. What happened? Not a goddamn thing. Not a goddamn thing. In fact, COVID happened right here. This is when COVID happened. And there was a downturn because Donald Trump mismanaged COVID. Remember, Donald Trump didn't want to admit that COVID was a real thing. He kept people trapped on a cruise ship rather than let them come back onto the United States because he was afraid that they would increase the numbers. He didn't want to do testing of people who might have COVID because Donald Trump was afraid that the numbers would reveal how much COVID had spread. And if COVID would have spread, he'd have to do something. So yeah, shit was shitty, right? Then in 2021, the Democrats passed a bunch of bills. The Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS bill. The CHIPS bill to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the United States. And then bam, look at that surge of investment. Our European allies were bitching about how good of a deal the United States gave their own companies. They were saying, this isn't fair business practice. What are you doing? The Europeans were complaining. So that's how you know it was a good deal. When the Europeans are complaining that we're doing too good for American business, that's how you know it's a good deal. So when the Democrats had a trifecta, they did a lot of good work. What happened? Well, in 2022, there was another election. And the Republicans of former Confederate states like Alabama and Louisiana, they drew up maps that were racist. They drew up maps that gerrymandered the voters into a position where black Americans would lose representation. And the people sued. The people sued the state for creating these gerrymandered maps. Well, the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that, you know what? We're going to keep these racist maps for the election. Just for the election. And then after the election's over, then we'll rule if those maps are racist or not. So Louisiana got to use the racist gerrymandered maps to do their election. And what happened was the Republicans managed to eke out a win in the House of Representatives. They took over the House of Representatives. Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans barely scraped by a win in the House of Representatives. After the election happened, and that granted the Republicans control of House of the Representatives, then the Supreme Court came back and ruled and said, yeah, these maps are racist, you can't use them anymore. After it had already been done. After they had already given control of the House of Representatives to the Republicans. So what happened after the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives? How many bills have been passed? Zero. They haven't done shit. Instead, the House of Representatives went into trying to impeach Joe Biden and investigating and trying to impeach Fauci and trying to impeach Mayorkas and trying to go after Hunter Biden. Like, essentially they gave us a preview of what it's like once Donald Trump takes power. They're going to stop legislating and passing laws for the good of the people and instead go after their enemies. They're going to use the power of the government to go after their enemies. That's what the because they're fascists. That's what fascists do. They concentrate power into the hands of the elite and then use that power for their own benefit. So anyone who paid attention these past years can see that the Democrats are way better at governing than the Republicans. And the Republicans can only win if they cheat. That's why the Republicans want to get rid of democracy, because they cannot win in a democracy. In the past 20 years, no Republican president has ever won the popular vote. They only win through manipulation of the Electoral College. They can't win in a democracy. So Republicans recognize that they will never hold power in a democracy. So their plan is to get rid of democracy. That's their whole plan. They're the ideological successors of the Confederacy. Like, the United States, we got a great thing going here. We have a great thing going. Like, it's an amazing idea that's never been done in history. To create a multiracial democracy. A democracy, a government, where the power is invested in the people, regardless of their sex, their gender, their race, their beliefs. It's all, it doesn't matter, because the thing that binds us together is that we're all humans, and we all have human rights. Slavers and Confederates cannot abide by this. That's why they want to destroy the United States. They cannot abide by the idea that all humans are free and equal. They can't stand human freedom. They want to subject humans to control of the king and suck their life essence for the king. So the king can live forever and the people wither and die. That's what they want. And that's what we're in right now. When the Supreme Court, controlled by the Republicans, gave their ruling that the Constitution was no longer valid, that was our sign that we've moved into unprecedented moment in history. The Supreme Court invalidated the Constitution. So that automatically leads us to conflict. Automatically. The Supreme Court invented words not in the Constitution and ignored words that were in the Constitution in order to crown Donald Trump king. It's the cumulation, I don't know how to say that word, of centuries of slavers trying to take power and destroy the United States. Centuries. This has been going on for centuries. The destiny of the United States is to become a multiracial democracy and become a model for the rest of the world. Because nowhere else in the world is there this kind of diversity that we have here in the United States. If we can show that diverse people can live in harmony with one another, it will be a model for the rest of the world. That's why the Confederates are so keen on destroying us. Because they know, once we succeed in creating a multiracial democracy, the rest of the world will follow. They know it. There will be no place in the world for white supremacists anymore. They will have lost everything. That's why they're trying so hard and going all in right now. Because this is their last moment. So today I hope you appreciate your independence and freedom. And understand that this feeling of independence and freedom is the thing that's under attack by the Republicans, by the slavers, by the white supremacists, by the fascists. They hate that. They hate your freedom. And they want to take it away from you. Which is why they're doing what they're doing. Everyone can read the Constitution and see nowhere is there the word immunity. But in the Constitution, it tells you straight up, the party convicted shall be nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to the law. It's in the Constitution. No matter what of impeachment, everyone is still under the law. It's in the Constitution. So anyone who tells you otherwise is your enemy. So yes, celebrate our freedom. Celebrate our day where our ancestors defeated the king in order to win us our freedom. Celebrate that. And remember that it's under attack right now. that there are forces that want to go back to the king. And these forces are promising to use violence in order to make it happen. They are promising to. So the Heritage Foundation is an organization dedicated to sending the United States back to a kingship, back to fascism. And after the Supreme Court tried to annul the Constitution, they released a statement saying that if anyone opposes their fascist takeover, there's going to be bloodshed. So the fascists are anticipating violence if anyone resists their coup. So we have to be ready that to stand together despite their threats of violence. Yeah, this is a great country. We're a great country. We're great because we have freedom for everyone. We're great because we have diversity. We're great because we have, like, you can even look at evolution, right? It's not even like that's how deep of a truth it is. That's how the idea that strength comes from diversity. That's not just like flu la la believe, that's not something you put your faith into. It's not an article of faith that diversity is strength. See? Faith is something for religion. No, it's not an idea of faith. This idea that diversity is strength is born out in nature. You can look into nature and see the truth of it. What am I talking about? So evolution, what does evolution say? A lot of people get it confused and say evolution, oh, that's the survival of the fittest. That's not the way, that's not true. Who said the survival of the fittest was a guy named Herbert Spencer, who was kind of a racist. He was a racist. Herbert Spencer came up with the idea that of something called social Darwinism. Herbert Spencer was trying to explain why we had rich and poor people in society. But Herbert Spencer was like not all that interested in justice. Not even justice, even in finding out what's going on. So he stole the idea of Darwin's idea, theory of evolution. He stole it and tried to apply it directly to society. He tried to do it. But it doesn't, and it sounds easy and popular. And so because it's easy, the idea spread, and but the idea is broken. You cannot apply evolution directly to society because society is a man-made concept. Is man-made. Humans make up society. It's not natural. It's not a natural thing. Humans create the structures in which they live. So you can't apply the theory of evolution directly to society because society isn't a natural thing. It's a human-made thing. No, the way you apply the idea of evolution is like this. Evolution says that the most adaptable species is the species that lives. Is the species that continues on through time. Because species are the way they are because that's the way that the environment is configured. If the environment were to change, then no longer will they be the one adapted to survive. You have to figure out which adaptation is the best to survive in the new environment. Now, if you're a species that has like no variation, if you're a species that has like everyone's the same as everyone else, if that's your deal, then the first time the environment changes, nobody in your group is going to be able to adapt to it because everyone's the same. So your group is going to die because when the environment changes, they're not going to be able to survive. However, the group with lots and lots of genetic variation, chances are somebody in your group, in your wildly varied genetics, somebody in your group is going to have the adaptation that is able to survive in the new environment. So that means, sure, a bunch of your species are going to die, but the ones with the correct adaptation will continue to thrive and move on into the future, thereby ensuring the continuation of your species. You don't get wiped out and made extinct. The whole point is to have variation in your genetics. The whole point is to have variation. The more diversity you have of your genetics, the better chance that there is that someone's going to have the adaptation necessary to survive a change in the environment. You want to have that in order to have a guarantee of moving forward into the future. I mean, it's built in, right? It's built into nature. So of course, the same principle would apply to human society. That human society is always changing, and the environment is always changing. The more diversity you have in your society, the better. Did you know that the Germans in World War II, the Nazis, had a machine called the Enigma machine? And this machine was an encryption, and it was so good that none of the code breakers could break it, except for one guy, Alan Turing, something like that. He was able to break the code for the Enigma machine. Like, he was the one guy that was able to do it. That guy turned out to be gay. Like, I don't know if it was the fact that he was gay that was able to, like, that gave him the perspective in order to be able to crack the Enigma machine, but whatever it is, he was able to crack the code, and that gave allies a huge advantage when fighting the Nazis. So, but the problem was that society back then wasn't accepting of gay people. So Alan Turing was ostracized and hounded for him being who he is, for him expressing the freedom of who he really is. And he ended up killing himself because of the persecution that he felt from society. Which is crazy, dude. It's crazy. It was that specialness of Alan Turing that allowed him to crack the code and save the rest of Western society, of Western civilization. Why would you, like, that's like the opposite of what we wanted to happen. We want to celebrate diversity. Diversity is our strength. It is the thing that helps us move forward through time. Yeah, we can't be snuffing out our diversity. It is the thing that's going to save us. And what do Confederates want? Fascists want? They want to create a homogeneous society where everything's the same and no one has freedom to be who they are. That's why, man, and celebrate your freedom. Celebrate your independence today. It's a great day. Fascists don't want you to have independence. Republicans don't want you to have independence. They want you to be slaves to a king. Fuck those guys. We're free. All humans are free. As intended by God. We're all free. But we're going to have to fight for that freedom. Hold on to it. Because the slavers are out to get us. Alright. I think that'll do it for me for this morning. Enjoy your Independence Day. and reflect upon your freedom. And be aware of those who would take that freedom from you. Until next time, Pogo Kiddo out. Peace.